So today we're doing something a little different. As we close out 2025, I wanted to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and assess both what happened this year and where things might be headed. How did buying behavior shift? What did marketers struggle with? How did advertisers and publishers adapt to an unpredictable market? At a media operator, we spend so much of our time talking about media companies, we sometimes forget that our advertising livelihood depends on how marketers react to things. If we can't provide value to them, we're out of luck. That's why I'm really excited to welcome Mark Connon for this discussion. As the CEO of Bombora, he's got an interesting vantage point. He talks to B2B marketers and revenue leaders every day, but at the same time, they're working closely with publishers with their data co-op to better understand audience intent and properly monetize those audiences. Mark, I really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So I want to jump right in because we've got a lot to get to. So let's pull back and kind of look at where things are from 2025's perspective and then kind of go from there. So from where you sit, what were the biggest shifts in B2B buying and research behavior in 2025?
Yeah, probably not surprisingly, it has to do with AI. The use of agentic search and the ability to find information through that has really changed the dynamic. It creates more opacity. There's research happening without visibility because oftentimes it happens within these agents. It also makes it easier for the number of stakeholders that are involved in a buying journey to be experts, right? Everyone can have a lot of information at their fingertips. So instead of having kind of siloed views within the buying journey from the number of stakeholders that are typically involved in B2B from 6 to 12, there's a level of a playing field between those, which creates an interesting dynamic. That having been said, I think sometimes it gets a little overstated. We do see that the referral traffic from those agents is low, as you'd expect, but we still see quite a bit of referral traffic from Google and traditional search. So it's different, but it really hasn't necessarily changed the sort of ecosystem the way one might think.
Has there been any research done about the quality of the click-through rates from these agents? Like, is there a higher intent from those people?
It's clearly sort of weighting the intent from someone who does click through, because that's someone who's spent the time understanding what they've sort of seen within the results and chosen to go on. So it is a stronger signal, we believe. And as we look at things in our content consumption and exposure sort of methodologies, we look at that as a different way of weighting the level of intent versus something which may have come in more, with less, sort of signal from what we would consider to be signal.
And what surprised you the most this year when you look across both your advertising and publisher partners?
I think coming into the year, it was towards the end of last year where we saw there was still a big move within publishers around the absence of the third-party cookie. How are they going to continue the monetization within their sites? And obviously, from a marketer standpoint, how can you continue to find an audience you're looking for? Google gave us yet another reprieve. This one seems, I wouldn't say permanent, a little longevity to this one. And as a result, although there's continues to be a focus around alternative addressability solutions. It's more towards how can the publisher, it's basically supply side and buy side, become closer, kind of reduce the supply chain in the kind of marketer to publisher ecosystem. Is something that we work, as you mentioned, we have a publisher co-op with thousands of publishers, and we also have a large audience or advertising business, and kind of sit between the two. So seeing how the advertiser wants to get closer to the publisher, and the publisher wants the advertiser closer because they have more to work with as they invest in quality. As they invest in where they might be losing scale in some cases, they invest in quality, and the closer you are to the advertiser and the more focus there has been on that, I think the better the outcome. So that's been a really pleasant shift from the plumbing of how things work to a substantive approach as to how the parties can work together.
And is that a trend you think is going to continue happening? A lot of those middlemen each taking a little cut, kind of disappearing, and the advertisers and the publishers getting closer?
I think so. We've been talking about it in the ecosystem for a long time. I think you need to really provide value to be a participant, and I think in that regard, I think you will see those that have high quality assets that enable publishers and advertisers will prevail, and those that are create either platforms or steps along the way that may not necessarily be as important, may kind of reduce their role.
All right, so you've got plenty of CMOs that use your data to make better advertising decisions. What's working for them, and where are the main challenges as they start going to market?
There's an overlap between the challenges and what's working, actually. I think the challenge is finding access to sort of clean, reliable intent data on which you can sort of build your strategies. I think the access to that is always a challenge, and one which both by publisher and advertiser side struggle with sometimes, but also measurement. So, it's one thing to have access to quality data or quality information on which to base your decisioning and strategies, but to be able to measure it, and particularly in B2B, has been a challenge over time. So as investments go more and more into B2B advertising to complement some of the sort of ABM sales approaches, the need to establish to the CFO and the CMO the return on those investments is important. And I think where those may be the challenges, not surprisingly, that's where a lot of effort has been focused. And so you're starting to see tactics or capabilities around measurement and the quality of data that really sort of demonstrate how not just that there has been an exposure to an ad or an exposure to to personalized content driven off of first and third party data, but how to take that signal and feed it back into the loop, right? So it's not just about, someone clicked on an ad, it's someone saw an ad, maybe they interacted with an ad, maybe they interacted with content. But it's taking that and feeding it back into your intent signal. And so I think the combination of the challenges of scaled quality data, obviously at Bombora, we feel like we're in a really good position there because of where we access our data from, which is consumption on our publisher sites, tied to companies that are consuming, as well as measurement capabilities that we've built into the programmatic ecosystem to allow that kind of feedback loop and to continue to inform, importantly, the models that inform the go-to-market strategies, ABM strategies of the marketer.
And so we talked about the marketers. On the publisher side, what are the pain points that you've heard them express?
There are some common themes. Scale, and it's not just measured in website traffic, but scale of first-party data, the assets that they're really sort of leaning into. For some of these publishers to go it alone, they need to partner. They need access to additional third party to complement. It's a lot to do with our co-op strategy, right? So it fits. We attempt to sort of fill that scale by bringing diverse data sets and sort of data recipes to allow them to do things to address some of the scale challenges they meet. The other is more kind of business model and kind of talent related. The business model is changing, right? It's you're not just selling ads, right? You're not just selling access to content or a product, right? You're selling access to an audience. You want to understand your audience and how you sell that audience and the value of that audience to particular advertisers is just different. And so I think there's an evolution within the publisher that's been happening for a while. This isn't just 2025, but I think we really see an acceleration of that, given the kind of sort of lean in on quality versus quantity within the publisher. So investing in sort of solutions that bring more engagement versus that may not necessarily bring as much scale.
And this is sort of in direct response to the traffic kind of shrinking because of AI and all that?
Some of it's traffic shrinking because of AI, and I think the types of investments that are making are certainly related to that. there's just much more focus on mining more from what you have. And that's actually most of our discussions with publishers, and not so much, woe is me, I've lost traffic or search referral. That's happened. A different, if you're a B2B vertical publisher, it hasn't really happened that much. If you're a larger publisher, you may see more of it. But the focus is more on not so much on, what's happening, but what do we do about it?
That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, the focus on quality is a better conversation to be had anyway.
It really is. I mean, and it's so, as much as people think that this is a challenging time, and it is for many reasons, I think the result may be a much higher quality engagement and experience for the consumer, in this case, the B2B consumer, the B2B buyer, or the marketer interacting with publishers. So I do think, it's definitely challenging us as an industry, and I think the result is pretty positive.
So I want to pivot the conversation for a little bit and talk about both intent and privacy. Looking back on 2025, what did the year teach us about the quality and reliability of intent signals as cookies fade a little bit and the signal loss becomes more real?
Yeah, probably be a little contrarian on that. Maybe a contrarian on two fronts, right? The cookie is here still, and as much as we and others have made a lot of investments to ensure that we have alternative addressability leading into the year, we have sort of continued to use it, and the industry still continues to rely on it. Maybe not as much, and still with an eye towards it going away and doing things that are better from a privacy standpoint. And then secondly, at Bombora anyways, when it comes to the intent signal, we're not really exposed to it. We have tag on page with our publishers, consented interaction with the consumer and with the customer. That allows us to collect intent data without relying on the cookie. So our ability to collect intent data hasn't been and won't be relying on the cookie. Secondly, I think a bigger picture observation is we haven't really seen loss of signal, right? And that's for a number of reasons. One is we continue to add publishers to our co-op, so we continue to scale. So that's more of our business model kind of thing. The other is the kind of investments in gathering signal through our content consumption engines and how we sort of categorize content. That sounds like it's a good thing for Bombora, but maybe not necessarily addressing the needs of the individual publisher. But that's the model of our co-op. The more we invest in gathering data across the co-op, making our co-op larger, the more participants they are, the more data we feed back to our publishers. We don't just take data from our publishers; we give it back to them, right? We tell them who their unknown users are. Not they work for XYZ company, or they have this job function. So that notion of that sort of building our asset over time and not seeing the scale impact, our publishers benefit directly from that. And it just feeds right back into their investment in quality. The more we can tell them about the types of people that are on the sites, the companies that they work for, the verticals that they're in, the more they can monetize that, use that for personalization, content, et cetera. So it's an interesting time, and we certainly have our eye on this notion of loss of signal. We're less susceptible to it because we're tag on page than probably most any other intent provider.
And do marketers and publishers need to be prepared for any upcoming data privacy changes that might be coming in 2026?
Sure, always, right? That there's, if there's anything constant, it's that there's always change when it comes to privacy, right? I think publishers have been in a good spot. They've invested in consent management platforms. They've seen this coming. They have sort of built the ability to interact with their consumer directly. So that's helpful. It's a little harder on the marketer side. They don't necessarily or usually have that direct relationship with the end user, the consumer. So they're investing in, alternative solutions to sort of enhance their understanding of who their customer is. We not coincidentally sit right between them and help both doing that. That's kind of been the business model from the beginning, and so, yeah, it's we have primary focus around privacy, and always have. And so it's as we work with both publisher and brand and marketer, there's always a preparedness that we need to have.
I want to move away from privacy in a second, but for publishers who might be concerned about their data going into the co-op and there being some concern about any liability they have. How do you help publishers understand that they're actually good to be part of the co-op? There's no risk in their data being kind of anonymized and shared. How does that work?
Yeah, conversations we've had every day for the past 10 years since we started the co-op, right? And we've built a mass of B2B publishers and larger publishers answering these questions, right? Their data is very important to them. They want it to come into the co-op. They don't want it associated with them in any way. What we're doing is independent of the source, building an intent signal, right? And an intent signal which they then benefit from. So, you can imagine in 2025, a bigger concern, a growing concern from publishers is wait a minute, what about AI? What are you doing with my data in AI? And is that a leakage point? We've addressed that really well in signing some of the kind of largest, most well-known publishers out there in the past year, in partnership with them to ensure that that leakage doesn't exist and that there's a clear value exchange that does not put their data at risk, but they truly benefit from.
All right, so let's now pivot and talk a little bit about revenue and demand gen and the evolution of going to market. So if we look to 2026, how do you see B2B marketing teams changing their demand gen strategies?
It's been really interesting, the trends that we've been seeing this year, and we expect to continue this way and based on our discussions and just the growth of our business and where it's growing. There's more of a focus around mid to top of funnel. Another way of saying more brand awareness versus B2B advertising has never really been performance in the B2C context, but there's always been a focus around particularly in the sales use case when you're sort of calling companies. You're trying to find people that are in market right now. I think what we're seeing is sales cycles are anywhere between 6 and 12 months and probably getting longer in times when budgets might be tighter with a number of different constituents or stakeholders. And so the ability to have brand awareness is really important and more so than it's ever been, which is another way of saying we see a tremendous growth in the programmatic advertising ecosystem where you can complement all of your other strategies, sales use case strategies and marketing with the ability to expose your brand and then measure it. Take that exposure and understand the impact that it may be having over the length of a long sales cycle. So that's been a big change, and as a result, we see more and more adoption. In Bombora, we have customers that just license our data to inform an intent signal to help their sales teams, and then we have companies that use it for marketing and advertising. What we're seeing more and more now is how those have melded to become this kind of holistic view of how to go to market, and a lot of it has to do with brand awareness feeding into the sales use case. So it's a really interesting time.
It almost seems as if we got so focused on performance, and it happens on the B2B side as well.
Sure.
How many leads can you drive me? It's always a lead conversation, but buying decisions are made before the lead opportunity even happens. I mean, there's research out that says that the vast majority of buying decisions happen before the person ever downloads a white paper or webinar or talks to a seller. And so that's a disadvantage if you're not doing brand. How are advertisers using the Bombora data to make those brand decisions and prove the value to the CFOs who tend to be more data-driven, and brand is a little bit fluffy when it comes to, ROI?
Yeah, it's really closed-the-loop measurement in part, and really the efficiencies of brand awareness. There's a recognition that the CFO knows the sales cycle is 6 to 12 months, right? And there are investments made across these large enterprises just for incremental change, because incremental change can be huge. And so the brand support and brand awareness support and the impact that the measurement can have on that. So this is my, ICP. This is a group I'm going after. I want to target those companies. I understand that they're in market. They have an intent signal, and so that reinforces why I want to reach that audience. So I know that they're in market. I can see the research, in partnership with Bombora. I can see where the intent is. I can see that the sort of the buying group or function. Okay, now I can see there's exposure to that. You feed that back in and sort of measure that exposure and measure the impact of that over time. And what we see and what our brands see is that has a real impact. But it also informs back into the sales cycle too, right? So you see this collaboration between sales and marketing within a brand, that's kind of really when it becomes powerful. And I think it's early days of measurement and it's early days of utilization of that data, but it's going to have we see it having a big impact, and I think it's going to drive a lot of spend against brand awareness, and a lot of growth within the enterprise as a result.
Which is actually a positive for publishers.
Totally.
Because, we have people coming to our sites regularly that have intent that might not want to download a white paper yet, but still need to learn about that particular brand. Right. So there's a real opportunity for pubs. On a more tactical nature, when we look at publishers, how should publishers, I know that they use your data for intent signals and all that, and they can report on that to their partners, but how should publishers be using your data as a monetizable product that they could sell to their advertisers?
Yeah, it'll be packaged in different things to enable that, what you can sell, right? It's combining it with context. It's creating kind of editorial capabilities and investments in editorial capabilities around personalization. Just knowing what your customers are interested in, right? What those advertisers or brands are demonstrating intent in. Well, it's being consumed on your page. You have that information. How do you, and we see this, right? We see this from our publishers investing much more heavily, as I mentioned earlier, in, so-called quality, but it's in focused editorial based on intent. It's, and really just developing sort of data as a service type offerings, right? Where you can actually sell your first and third party data in combination to brands, whether to drive different sort of use cases. So I think there's a lot that is done with it, and some of it's just to enhance targeting, right? We can in real time tell you something about someone who's on your page right now, and you can then monetize that through advertising on your site in real time. So it kind of runs the gamut from kind of traditional, enhanced targeting to more sophisticated packaging and sort of enabling subscription services, through quality of content and editorial. So there's a number of different ways that the publishers use our data.
All right. So we're only a few weeks away from 2026, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Which industry or verticals are looking the strongest based on the signals that you're seeing? Are there any that might be hurting? Like where's the strength and weakness out in the market right now?
Yeah, we have a tendency to focus on the strengths because we're looking at intent, and I guess the absence of intent could be a weakness. But one of the areas that we've really focused a lot on, and again, not surprisingly, is AI. And not the use of AI, but actually what are the topics and intent being demonstrated by AI companies? So AI dedicated companies, so are building applications, agentic solutions that are kind of purpose-built businesses. And in those cases, we see topics really focused not on sort of development of solutions, but on monetization around kind of strategic decisioning. Essentially, topics indicating that there's a focus on how do we avoid the AI bubble? Mm-hmm. Can we monetize these applications that we're developing? We've demonstrated the ability to build a lot of cool stuff, right? Is it a business? Can we satisfy investors? So we see topics demonstrating that focus from within that cohort of AI companies. Is probably not shocking, but it's really interesting as sort of a validation as you look at those types of companies, particularly from a B2B perspective, right? Are these viable businesses that I'm selling my solutions into, or are they going to be here a year from now? The flip side of it is the large established tech companies, the Googles of the world. like their topic indications or topic strategies, or what we see from intent, have much more to do with how do I take what I have and do more with it? How do I extend my footprint? It's not on, obviously not on, sort of viability of business model as much as it is extended use cases. So I think, it's just an example of, kind of validated by what we see every day and what we hear and read about. But that focus around, 2025 has been a really great year for AI and developing of really cool tools. Are they businesses? And then we see it in real time. The big players looking a different direction. It's like, we have business. We want to build applications. So it's probably the most talked about and most visible area that we see.
All right, so a year from now, you and I are going to sit in this exact same room. What is an underrated trend today, either on the advertising or publisher side, that a year from now everyone's going to be talking about, saying, crap, Mark was right?
I wish I had something that would be, wow, Mark was right. I think it'll be obvious that Mark would be right. I think a lot of people will be right on this one, or at least a couple of them. I think I mentioned data as a service and packaging data. I think there's more of a model there for publishers. I think that's going to be a real driver of, I think, innovation and growth for publishers. I also think, and we see this across the board with a lot of our publishers, a big investment in events, right? And it sounds, spinning out of a conversation from AI to go back to putting people in buildings, it sounds sort of counterintuitive. It's a really rapidly growing part of a publisher's business. They realize it's kind of AI proof. It actually gives them an opportunity to interact with and establish a relationship with their customers. And the quality of the events actually is quite high. So there's like attendance and participation will be high as well. So I think, there's some old schoolness to, I think, what will be big in 2026. That will be powered by all of the AI solutions and agentic solutions and the things that we talk about. It'll be different than they may have been in the past, but we see a lot of opportunity there. And maybe quite selfishly, we love it because we participate in the data as a service, but we also, there's oftentimes no greater indicator of intent than participation in an event. So it's a great signal for us too.
Yeah, there's an operator who is buying up live events specifically with this idea of an anti-AI thesis.
Yeah.
AI can't destroy the ability to have a conversation face-to-face, no matter how hard it might try, and no matter how weird some Silicon Valley people might want that.
Yeah, it's true.
It's not going to happen. We'd like to talk to each other. So, and you're right, the number of intent signals at an event, whether that's the sessions that you're attending or the booths that you stop and meet with, like those all, if I stop and look at 5 customer data platform sponsors at an event, I'm probably in the market for a customer data platform. And that's a signal that I think a media company that is selling to people looking for CDPs wants to know. So that's a super...
and it's... And the import of the signal is not so much that Mark or Jacob is in, but it's that Bombora, right? It's that my company, because that immediately informs me that, because I know that the buying group is not just one person, right? So it's kind of yes, it's an access point through an individual, but it's more an understanding of intent at a company level, which provides a lot of value.
Yeah, it's the one-to-many in all these decisions. All right, so if you're advising either a CMO and a publisher revenue leader for 2026, what would be the top few priorities you would tell them to focus on?
I think it would be partnering. The days of kind of going it alone, not that there's always been partnership, but the import of partnering across the ecosystem, I think, is going to be really important. That's partnering with data providers, partnering with other publishers, partnering. We've made investments, for instance, and there's a lot of high quality B2B data signal out there that's not in the advertising ecosystem, that exists in other platforms or other companies. We've announced some with Crunchbase or G2 and we've been able to sort of partner with these companies to bring really curated high quality data into our ecosystem that our publishers are now dealing with. And now they're working, it creates this kind of holistic sort of partnership view of how we can sort of grow together. I mentioned it addresses things like scale, but also quality and what they have access to. This will come back to the AI discussion a little bit too. Really scrutinize, now that I say partner widely, scrutinize your partners as we're scrutinized, right? Focus on quality of data, where the data is sourced. There's AI models are great. And as a B2B data company, we love AI because an AI model or an agentic solution is only as good as the data you put into it, right? And so you need access to high quality scaled data from across your ecosystem. And so I think, really focusing on that, even more so than has been the case in the past. And I think the return on that sort of scrutiny should be high.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. If I think about, what publishers and even marketers should take from this, there's a couple things that kind of come to mind. One, we've talked quality, both quality audience, but quality of partnerships. Crap goes in, crap comes out. So you better trust the data that you're getting, but also that data makes your audience more valuable. And if you can convert someone from unknown to known, that's super valuable. So that is one trend that I think all operators on all sides of the ecosystem need to think about. And then the second is, I'm actually very excited about this idea that brand is coming back, because I think for too long we have been so focused on just the conversion, the lead, the immediate return on investment, and it doesn't take into consideration how we all buy things. We are all impacted by brand. We don't just wake up and go, sneakers, let me just go click the first ad and buy a pair of sneakers. No, we want brand, and it works in software as well. So I really appreciate you doing this. I learned a ton. Bombora is an incredible company for publishers to work with. You've got an incredible data co-op that brings all this data together in hot ones that give you 30 seconds to talk about what you're doing and what you're up to. Give us your spiel on Bombora. Why should publishers work with you? And then we'll wrap up.
Great. Dedicated B2B data company. I've been working with publishers since the inception. The entire concept of Bombora was a publisher co-op. Understand content consumption at the company level, turn that into an intent signal, learn about the user, feed that back to the publisher with advertising capabilities, personalization, and monetization, and really just making the publisher smarter about who comes to their site and know more about them. So that recipe of, both the kind of circular, we get value, but we provide as much or more value back to our publishers in a time when that is critical. It makes us really excited into the future. So we work with publishers, but we also work with the brands. And I think that sort of, as we sit in the middle, gives us a really unique perspective. It helps brands understand what publishers want. It helps publishers understand what brands want. And I think we're uniquely situated for that.
Love it. Well, Mark, thank you so much. For anyone who wants to learn more, go to bombora.com, and happy holidays. We will see you in 2026.
Thanks very much for having me.